Uh, I often think in my role as the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee about America's role in the world and what it means and and the benefits. It has great burdens, but it also has benefits along the way. And for decades, the United States has been the leader in the global financial system. About half of international trade is invoiced in dollars. About half of all international loans and debt securities are denominated in dollars. And dollars are involved in nearly 90% of all foreign exchange transactions. And that has been an immeasurable asset to the American economy and our foreign policy goals. It allows American consumers to borrow more cheaply for a house or car. It allows the U.S. government to use economic sanctions to change other countries' behavior and ultimately try to avoid military conflict. But that could all change if we were to default on our debt. So, Dr. Zandi and Dr. Holz-Aiken, how would defaulting on the debt harm the United States' position as the dominant reserve currency?
It would severely undermine it, and I don't think we can overstate the importance of being the reserve currency on the planet. Particularly, I think people don't recognize how important this is in times of crises, because we have global crises, and in those periods of time, because the United States is the AAA credit on the planet, because everyone believes that if they invest in a U.S. Treasury bond that they will be paid in a timely way, money comes here, capital comes here, and that is an enormous benefit to our economy at the worst of economic times. So the reserve currency status provides enormous benefits to us. And as you said, there are responsibilities, but there are enormous benefits to that, and that would be significantly diminished because we're no longer money good. You know, global investors don't know for sure that they're going to get their money back if they invest in the United States of America, and they're going to invest somewhere else. And it diminishes us geopolitically as well when you think about it. You know, think about the importance of the reserve currency status when Russia invaded Ukraine and what we did to sanction Russia. The first thing we did was freeze the dollar reserves of, the Russians' dollar reserves. We wouldn't be able to do that in a world where, we're no longer the reserve currency. And then it also reduces and diminishes our status geopolitically, economically with China. I mean, China is a formidable competitor, and it's increasingly found in reserve portfolios across the world, and this is increasing over time, and that would significantly be accelerated if the U.S. Abdicated its role as, and that's what we'd be doing. We'd be abdicating our role as a reserve currency. So it would be, these are things I'm not even counting for in the kind of the analysis that I did that are so difficult to quantify, but they are critically important to our success, both economically and geopolitically.
So I agree with everything that Mark said, and I just want to pick up on the last point. The world benefits from having a reserve currency. Because those transactions can be done in a common currency, they're cheaper, more efficient, global trading and investment flows more smoothly, and all economies benefit from that. So the notion that we could give up the creditworthiness of the treasuries and have the world stand by and not go find another reserve currency is missing the big point. It would, and we would be handing that opportunity to China. And at this juncture, there's no reason to do that.
Yeah, you've both made the case that I'm concerned about. We already see China trying to do this in a variety of ways, and that's without defaulting on our debt. We see them in the context of trying to create a digital reserve as well. They're out there to challenge us in every dimension. And just one final point to add a fine point to this question. If we were to default, and God forbid that we do, would it be easy to put the genie back in the bottle and convince others in the world, don't worry, that happened once, it won't happen again?
Would you be convinced? I mean, no. I mean, it's just not possible.
I'm not easy to convince generally. But
it's not possible. I mean, investors, since the founding of the nation, this was a principle that we established. Alexander Hamilton, the first Treasury Secretary, bought back U.S. The Revolutionary War debt on pennies on the dollar to establish the credit of the United States, that we are money good. You put your money with us, you're good. And if we, so as just 1 second go over the line and not pay in a timely way, we lose that forever. And it's incalculable, the cost, because you'd add just a few basis points to interest rates, and it's going to be more than that. Just add a few basis points on $31 trillion in debt. Just think about that for a second. The cost that we were going to incur. We're going to be shelling out cash to Japanese bond investors, Chinese bond investors, British bond investors, instead of investing in our schools and Head Start, in our military, and all the things that we all can agree on as Americans that we need to do.
Just to drive the point home, revisit the opening statement that Michael Strain gave. I mean, in 2011, we didn't default, but we still incurred enormous costs. We got downgraded, and it took years to repair that. Now imagine actually defaulting.
Yeah, that global leadership makes for a more secure domestic financial system and advances U.S. interests at home and abroad. I appreciate your answer to that. May I have, if you have the time? My friends often talk about that we need to deal with the question on spending cuts, but they've depleted the revenue side of the ledger over the last several years. Dr. Zandi, how much did the 2017 Republican tax law add to the federal deficit over 10 years?
I'm using CBO numbers here, but it will add $2 trillion over the 10-year period, give or take.
Yeah. So, I mean, you know, if we want to have an honest discussion, I think we have to look at all sides of the ledger at the end of the day. And it seems to me that the time to do those things is when you're talking about budgets, not when the time comes due on your debt. Finally, last year, Congress appropriated, for example, $8 billion to the Child Care and Block Development Grant, CCDBG. This is the main federal program that provides funding for child care providers to support low-income families in accessing affordable child care. I've heard from child care providers throughout New Jersey who conveyed that this funding has been critical to their survival in what is an incredibly low-margin industry. So I would ask Ms. Weisenfront and Ms. Matsui, what would be the impact on families and child care providers if there is an insistence on slashing vital discretionary funding like the CDBG as a precondition to avoiding a debt default?
Our program is funded by about 85% federal money. And in our program, if there was that kind of cut, we would have to, most of our children would lose services to care. Most of our most vulnerable children and families. It would really break the system that we've so intentionally built to support the poorest and most vulnerable children and families in our Western Mass service area. It would be tragic.
Ms. Matsui?
Thank you for the question, Senator, and I appreciate the expertise of my colleague on the panel. I will just add that losing that level of services and child care supports will not only devastate the child care sector, the workers who are employed in child care, but also the parents and families and the employers and the economy writ large who rely on caregiving in order for the economy to function. We saw the devastation during the pandemic, and those effects would certainly be replicated, if not exacerbated, because of the weakened state of childcare right now.
Yeah, we want people to work. We have 11 million jobs that are going unfulfilled in terms of human capital to do so, and yet we would potentially take away one of the essential elements of helping people get to work so that they can be gainfully productive both for themselves, their families, and our society. So it's one example of which this type of thinking doesn't make sense. Thank you, Madam Chair.